fact community that said that was a good thing. And the Post leaned in, touting its role as a newspaper holding the Trump administration accountable, even buying, do you remember this, a pricey Super Bowl ad in 2018. Now, you might be thinking newspapers are usually pleading for donations or offering you a mug or a tote bag to buy to subsidize them. And by the way, I encourage you to consider doing that if you like your local paper. But they don't usually buy the most expensive ad space of the year. But again, they had that billionaire owner. And here was that ad's mantra.
Because knowing empowers us. Knowing helps us decide. Knowing keeps us free.
Democracy dies in darkness. And Bezos, in that era, spoke out against exactly how Trump was demonizing the free press.
It's really dangerous to demonize the media. It's dangerous to call the media lowlifes. It's dangerous to say that they're the enemy of the people. We live in a society where it's not just the laws of the land that protect us. We do have freedom of press. It's in the Constitution. But it's also the social norms that protect us. It works because we believe those words on that piece of paper. And every time you attack that, you're eroding it a little bit around the edges.
That was dangerous, he said. And Bezos knew his business empire would still have to deal with the United States government under President Trump. The Post held strong, and while it insisted on a nonpartisan approach, it wasn't against any single party. The nature of Trump's agenda, his attacks on the rule of law and democracy and facts, right, tested how top news outlets would face that extremism. And the Post didn't shirk. Bezos had the Post's back with that slogan we mentioned, democracy dies in darkness. He said there's an important role in making sure there is light against that. And Trump took his beef with the journalists. He escalated to the front office, as he does. He wanted to punish the owner, Bezos, for being involved with the Washington Post. And he also clearly wanted to send a threat, a message to other rich and powerful people through this process. We'll come back to that in a moment tonight. But very quickly it became clear Trump hates Amazon were the headlines, reporting on Trump's goal to abuse power to go after Amazon. That's according to 5 direct sources they had. Trump's obsessed with Amazon, a source said, obsessed. This wasn't just idle talk. Trump used his government power, took measures to go after the businesses tied to the press that reported on him. What we know is what has been revealed. There may be other efforts we don't, but there are headlines and fact-check reports about him trying to punish CNN by imposing the merger of its corporate parent. That ultimately passed, or denying billions that Amazon was maybe going to get from government contracts. That's according to one lawsuit about Trump's vendettas. In the last campaign, which we all lived through, Trump only got more explicit. Retribution for perceived foes. And so Bezos, even before Election Day, clearly saw all this, what I just showed you, fought what he would have called the good fight back in the first term, and made a shift. And there are new developments on this today. For Bezos, gone were the vows to defend the Post no matter what, or to affirm that mantra for democracy. Bezos actually jumped into the editorial side. This was in the campaign homestretch. You probably remember some of it, to change their practice and eliminate any presidential endorsement in 24. An unusual move which suggested Bezos was taking this new tack. Now, in fairness, I want to make sure you understand all sides of the story. He claimed that the endorsement shift had nothing to do with Trump. But the action yanked the planned Harris endorsement, which broke practice. And so to many, it looked like a signal to Trump that Bezos would be able to at least take some actions at the Post, maybe not hand editing every story, but some actions to appease Trump, to quiet some of the Washington Post activity which Trump opposed or viewed as critical. Now, I want to be very simple and clear here. The point is not that the endorsement itself would somehow shape that election. Very few people think national newspaper endorsements are the final thing that shifts undecideds in swing states. And Trump has never gotten many of those endorsements. Meanwhile, he's still won the election twice, once outright and once through the Electoral College. The point was that Bezos was using the Post differently in a way that would appeal to Trump. And that while Bezos denied that goal, he would say that it wasn't the reason. His own reporters and editors saw it that way. And they're the ones with inside knowledge about how things work. And they were so concerned, some of them took the type of professional and economic risk that Bezos and these other billionaires are not taking, resigning their jobs over this journalistic incident. Bezos said that stopping that planned Harris endorsement had nothing to do with Trump and Harris, that it was an unusual late October shift, but it was designed to improve the Washington Post's credibility. He wrote that presidential endorsements create a perception of bias. And as for appealing to Trump, no quid pro quo of any kind is at work. Neither campaign nor candidate was consulted or informed. Okay. But there was no allegation of a formal quid pro quo, and I mean, this is not an impeachment probe. And newspaper owners can do what they want. There was also no allegation that Bezos was going to tell Trump in advance. Everyone was going to find out when this happened, including Trump, when you yanked the endorsement. The actual objection from those top Post journalists, some of them now former employees, was that Bezos was forbidding the paper from what it usually does for one reason: to warm up to Trump in the context of all of the business pressure. Now, that controversy went on and on. Now there's new evidence on what Bezos' business empire is doing, because they've made a new $1 million donation to Trump's inaugural committee. That's the kind of support and message that doesn't happen without Bezos. You can see the Wall Street Journal, which knows business, very clearly says Bezos' Amazon will donate this $1 million to Trump's inauguration. And the billionaire, in a recent interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin, went out of his way to double down on, and I'm showing you this all now because we know more now than when this happened in October, to double down on the very perception that he claimed he opposed in the clash over Bezos yanking the Harris endorsement. And it's a lot more money than Amazon gave in 2016, which was around $57,000. So many, many other orders of magnitude this time, which looks different. And now Bezos says he's optimistic about Trump and his leadership. And he also says in his warming up to Trump something that we don't hear much even from Trump's aides, and I've interviewed a lot of them over the years. Bezos says America is witnessing a changed new Trump, a calm and settled leader.
If we're talking about Trump, I think it's very interesting. I'm actually very optimistic this time around. You've probably grown in the last 8 years. He has too. He is calmer than he was the first time and more confident, more settled.
There you have that. Bezos is one very important businessman who chose to enter this fray with the Washington Post purchase. But the point tonight is not even to just fixate on him or the link to journalism, because this is much broader. Consider that Trump's many attacks on democracy and the FBI are often seen first in the context of law and politics, like his recent claims about sending political opponents or political critics to go to jail. But the same autocratic issues come up in business. And this is a trend we've seen in many countries where any leader can wield unchecked power. It affects business first and foremost, because all around the world people need money, and a lot of people want more money than they have. So now we're seeing some of the richest, most powerful business leaders rush to fold, including tech leaders who often pride themselves in their public remarks and their entire branded lives as being smart and independent and having visionary plans beyond the way things used to work or the old government routines, let alone giving in to brash efforts to intimidate them. But some of them are already folding, and if they are, what message does this send to everybody else who certainly doesn't have their money and lawyers and networks of support? You see the faces here, some of them famous. Mark Zuckerberg shifting gears to cozy up to Trump following the Elon Musk school. Others might be less known by their face. Google CEO Sundar Pichai was joining his own company employees' protests in the first Trump era. What a different time that was. You think about when people say, well, this isn't politics or this isn't partisan, there's right and wrong, or you have to stand up. And as the leader of a company, sometimes there are issues that come up where your own employees say, how can we even work here if you won't stand up? And it was in that context that the Google CEO stood up against one of Trump's first acts in government, the travel ban.
There are some values which are really near and dear to your heart. It's foundational and something which you should never compromise on. And the fight will continue. So
Google's leader going from what he said right there, quote, never compromise, that against the travel ban in year one of Trump, to now making the trip to Mar-a-Lago, even amidst planned mass deportations, which at a numerical level could affect far more immigrants and people who are in this country or trying to come and go into this country than the original travel ban on which he said he'd never compromise. Another leader, CEO Mark Benioff, opposed Trump in 2016. Now he says he sees great promise for Trump's America. Or take one of the newest tech heroes, the artificial intelligence pioneer Sam Altman, who is, by all accounts, a brilliant person. We've even had some of his employees on this program to explore the visionary field of AI. But I want to remind you something that he might not want you to know. Maybe you can find it in ChatGPT. In 2016, he said Trump was an unacceptable threat to America, unfit to be president. Now, he would have you believe the threat has become the solution. And Altman says that Trump is a great leader to take us into the age of AI. He knows money talks, and he went even beyond the company coffers and made a personal donation of $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund. The richest, most powerful business titans. On record, some of them warning about Trump's danger, even spending years in what they called the good fight. Some warning about his abuse of power to silent dissent and corrupt systems, ranging from a free press to a free market. And what we're seeing now is that they are bending. They are doing what author Tim Snyder warns against, obeying in advance. And so with everything else going on, we ask tonight, what does this portend for the Trump second term? And does reporting the truth about it even matter? And that answer is simple. Of course it does. It's precisely the power of truth, of facts, of reporting, especially when powerful forces are not held accountable by other dynamics, that makes this such a big story. It's why Jeff Bezos bought the Post. It's why Trump wants to control these forces, the press, and the people who might be subjected to learn some facts about him or his government, past, present, or future. It's why your knowledge of these facts matters, even in an environment where there's a heck of a lot of money swirling around between some people eating their own words, because they used to warn against the very efforts to stifle dissent and facts that they are now joining. The work doesn't let up, but neither does life. We'll be back together in 90 seconds.
I have dry eye, tired, itchy, burning. My symptoms got worse over time. My eye doctor explained the root was inflammation. So he prescribed Xiidra. Xiidra works differently. Xiidra targets inflammation. Over-the-counter drops don't do this. They only hit pause in my symptoms. But twice daily Xiidra gives me lasting relief.
Xiidra treats the signs and symptoms of dry eye disease. Don't use if allergic to Xiidra and seek medical help if needed. Common side effects include eye irritation, discomfort, blurred vision, and unusual taste sensation. Don't touch container tip to your eye or any surface. Before using Xiidra, remove contact lenses and wait 15 minutes before reinserting.
Dry eye over and over, it's time for Xiidra.
Eggs make all our family moments better, especially when they're Eggland's Best. Taste so fresh and amazing. Deliciously superior nutrition, too. For us, it's eggs any style, as long as they're the best. Eggland's Best.
At Harbor Freight, we design and test our own tools and sell them directly to you. No middleman, just quality tools you can trust at prices you'll love. Whatever you do it for less at Harbor Freight.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg's been over to see me, and I can tell you Elon is another, and Jeff Bezos is coming up next week, and I want to get ideas from them. Look, we want them to do well.
Donald Trump at the New York Stock Exchange touting his current relationships. We're joined by Valencia Johnson, a veteran of the Biden-Harris 2020 campaign, author of Flip the Tables, the Everyday Disruptor's Guide to Finding Courage and Making Change. Welcome. What do you see happening here?
Well, listen, when I think about how literally the top 1% in this country has literally 40% of the wealth in this country, and we continue, you've reported on this, we talk about how the wealth gap continues to widen in this country and how people feel powerless when it comes to getting ahead, not only financially, but even when it comes to their rights. This Billionaire Boys Club, and not Pharrell's brand that he had,
Respect.
this Billionaire Boys Club that is about to be here in Washington, D.C. is extremely scary. And it's frustrating to see that some of these tech CEOs who you just talked about, who seem to have had principle about them, who had values in the first Trump administration, those quickly went away, even before he was elected, right? You talked about the endorsement that didn't come out because Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. And so it is very frustrating. We see what this is going to look like in regards to governing, but I'm actually interested to see how the people are going to respond to this, even people who voted for Donald Trump, who are going to see, oh, wait a minute, you actually don't care about me. It's more about your billionaire friends and you being able to be popular again.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you make, because no one's saying that you have to deride success. One of the pitches was that this would be aspirational, that the voters for Trump, or people who want to get ahead, would be joining this billionaire class. The early indications, and we'll follow the facts where they go, don't show much focus on them. And I want to show a little more Trump at the stock exchange, where you get the visual, right, of he's at the New York Stock Exchange, the center of American finance, touting all these relationships. And if you are not in the, not 1%, but the upper slice of the 1% of these billionaires, this may not benefit you. So here he was talking about how he picked his Treasury nominee.
Scott Bessent's done a fantastic job, and one of the things I liked about Scott is that he said long before I even know who he was that the market's only doing well. This is before the election. It's only doing well because they think Trump is going to win. So we made Scott the Treasury Secretary.
May or may not be true, but he sort of says, well, you know, I got good compliments. Boom, you get the job. When you look at tech, they seem to think that they would rather err on the side of eating their words and warming up to him quite early and quite publicly than be on the wrong side of what has been some very serious threats.
Well, on the wrong side of serious threats that threaten their government contracts, but not necessarily the wrong side of what the people need, right? As these tech companies continue to do better, that is because of price gouging. That is because some of these workers are not being paid their fair share. They're not being paid a livable wage. And so the reality is, I hope the American people start to see, as these corporations, these tech giants become more powerful, their livelihood is actually going to be worse off. And I'm so glad that in your opening package, you connected this to truth-telling, because there's this attack on journalism, traditional journalism, but we know people are getting a lot of information on social media and believing that. So where's the fact-checking going to go there? We saw what happened when Elon Musk bought Twitter, now X. We knew exactly what was going to happen. He was going to dismantle this ability for organizers to actually come together and have the fact-checking in real time on those social media posts. What's going to happen with misinformation and disinformation that's going to continue to allow the least of these in this country continue to vote for folks who want to consolidate power for their billionaire friends? Yeah, and that point just keeps coming up, because as powerful as they are, whether it's Musk or Bezos, they're buying these other things precisely because they recognize the facts can matter. That's why they bought a newspaper. And social media matters because of the people behind it. If you don't have a user base, you don't have a good product. And so there is something underneath all that, even in these times of cynicism, that the people and outlets with facts still matter. That's why they actually want to control them. Alencia Johnson, always good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Later in the show, we have some prominent Trump opponents with new strategies on how to deal with these enemies list calls since 1933. And it's also why people are actually right to feel pretty confident you can leave the money in the bank account, even if there's a lot of choppiness in the markets. FDR started it during the Great Depression to end the kind of bank runs you might remember from It's a Wonderful Life.
My husband hasn't worked in over a year, and I need money.
How am I going to live until the bank opens?
I got doctor bills to pay. I need cash.
I can't
keep my kids on faith. I've got to have...
How much do you need?
Hey! I got $2,000. Here's $2,000. This will tide us over to the bank reopen.
We're joined now by Gene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize winner for the Washington Post. Seasoned, distinguished, but You weren't there in 33. You weren't there that
No, I'm old, Ari, but I'm not that old. Come on.
and neither am I, and it seems to be a rare good thing that they came up with this solution. I showed the facts. What does it tell you that these kind of things are on the table?
Well, look, this is one of the worst, stupidest, most irresponsible ideas I have ever heard. And I've heard of a lot.
Yeah, you report in
bad
Washington,
ideas. This FDIC is something that, as you said, has worked. It has worked perfectly since 1933. It guarantees that we don't have those kinds of bank runs. And just talking about getting rid of FDIC, and presumably they would say, oh, we're replacing it with this or we're replacing it with that. People know those four letters. They know FDIC. They see it.
Yeah, you check on your checking.
Right, and they see it when they walk into the bank. It's there on the door, FDIC insured. And so if you get rid of that, you're going to start having bank runs. Anytime a bank gets even a little over its skis, has any little sort of problem, there's going to be a run on the bank. And, of course, no bank can withstand a run. So we're going to have bank failures. And we don't have them now, and it's largely because of FDIC.
Do you think there is something happening where there are people who are very upset with the way things are, and they say they want to overthrow and disrupt? And in some spaces, that might make a lot of sense. You want to disrupt the way Wall Street has too much power in Washington. You want to disrupt the way healthcare industry works, which is something Barack Obama actually tried to do over time. Do you think there's something happening, at least around this Trump transition, where you have people who have limited to no experience in government?
Yeah.
And they have this idea of, well, disrupt is cool no matter what.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, let's disrupt the thing that actually protects regular people, red, blue, and in between.
Let's disrupt everything, and that's not a good idea. Let's disrupt what needs disrupting, but let's not. And, there's another factor, of course, because Trump is planning to staff his administration with billionaires and 100 millionaires. And for them, $250,000 worth of insurance is kind of trivial, right? I mean, that doesn't really affect them. They have to watch out for their huge investments in other ways. Their billions are not insured by the federal government. But for everybody else, for normal Americans, this is really important. And I think some of them just don't get that. They don't.
Right, it's not even on the table.
It's not important to them.
It's not in their mindset that if you're a retiree and you've saved all your life and you've moved some money, say, out of stocks, and you got $8,000 in there, that's what you're literally living on. And there could be a financial crash.
Exactly.
And month to month, that's what you were living on, literally.
Exactly. That's what you were living on. And so, it's one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. Another of the worst ideas I've ever heard is, one of RFK's advisors wants to, get rid of the polio vaccine.
Yeah,
he doesn't like the polio vaccine.
We have this. This was a lawyer for RFK who's helping vet potential officials and had previously petitioned, I think we have this, right, to the yes? Over here? Camera 2 is what I'm looking for. The vaccine was a medical marvel. It protected millions from death, from iron lung treatment. Gene just mentioned it. We just wanted to show some of these facts in recent decades. Global polio cases have dropped over 99%. Right. So that's just a mini quick fact check on that.
Exactly.
And as you're mentioning on the bad idea carnival, this is now kicking around RFK. Do you think that senators have to really vet that when they look at him as a nominee?
I think they must. I mean, look, this is a stupid, irresponsible, deadly idea. People don't remember polio, when polio was endemic, and when kids got polio. I mean, I have a neighbor, he's older than I am. I had a neighbor when I was growing up who had polio.
Yeah.
My kids...
And Gina Paul made a kind of Trump-proof the DOJ with preemptive pardons, at least to the potential targets. This move would, to be clear, be unprecedented in all of American history. Trump-proofing the FBI and DOJ against certain enemy targets has a lot of questions, pros and cons. We do know, though, that Trump's current planned pick for the FBI director already has an enemies list of his own, and raised concerns about where this all heads. And there are lawmakers that Donald Trump has literally named that he said, even after the election, should be in jail. So we are in unusual times. You hear the word unprecedented used. It could be negative or positive, or you could do something unprecedented to counter these unprecedented efforts sometimes to abuse federal powers. Now, potential recipients of the concept, the possibility of these preemptive pardons, seem currently split on even taking them.
If he offers it to me or other members of the committee, I think I would accept it, but it's his choice.
I don't think pardons are necessary. Those of us on the committee are very proud of what we did. We feel it was an important public service.
Partly, it's just a question of how you define what the pardon is. Traditionally, pardons are for criminals. But if you say all traditions are being broken, and this is a way to kind of create a new immunity, then some legal scholars think perhaps there are attributes to this. Remember, we're talking about a post-election President Morty. Now, in its 8th season, it is a remarkably bold, transgressive, and sometimes downright odd cartoon using sci-fi themes of space travel, multiple universes, and intergalactic ethics to explore the meaning of life and the failure of systems like government, capitalism, and religion. There is joking and mocking while also challenging us to critically question these forces and consider what makes a life worth living. It's a product of the unique mind of writer and co-creator Dan Harmon, joining us for his first TV interview since the election. So you talk about Rick's powers and abilities, and then you use this clashes with the president as one of the only types of people who possibly, or in their own mind, is on par with Rick, right? So there's like a rivalry there that he wouldn't have with, I guess, most normal humans in his planet, right? We have a look at this recurring president character. Let's take a look.
Time to get swifty. Get swifty? What the hell is that?
It's our world's best effort, that's what.
I was kind of hoping that I could get a selfie with you.
Actually, if you try to tell anyone what happened here, we'll deny it. Welcome home, dinosaurs.
Oh, I could use a vacation.
Should we nuke them?
I'm on vacation, Curtis.
Well, you leaned into this fast.
Submit! Submit for the selfie! I yield! I yield!
I am selling New York to France and giving all of the money to Congress.
Yeah! All right, yeah! Now that's how you do it?
He became president today.
First of all, that's something that in politics we always make fun of when people say this made him president. Yeah. What points are you sharing or enjoying getting off your chest? There's some political observations here through this storyline.
I don't know. I hate to be a contrarian and a frustrating interview subject. I have a lot of political bones to pick, but that wouldn't make for good entertainment if I then used, like, I'm not trying to point anything out about politics that everybody hasn't always pointed out. For instance, in those clips, it's just sort of like we all have a general mistrust of authority, and people who pay themselves to tell us what to do are, you know, they're a bunch of clowns, and they.
Well, I'll try one. You can be as difficult an interviewer subject if you want, but the repeating politics storyline in Rick and Morty calls bull on the idea that politics is public service. With, I guess, maybe rare exceptions, most of these people are doing it for their own power and their own stuff, and that is that's a skepticism, right, that's not shared by people who think of this as a higher calling.
Yeah, there's a conversation between Rick and the president, and I can't even remember the episode, but it was really satisfying to write, where the two of them, I think it's in the Turkey episode maybe, but it's really just sort of like, it's a piping of their perspectives. I mean, one guy is the head of a country called America, and Rick is just way above that. I mean, he doesn't even have loyalty to Earth, let alone the nation that claims Earth as its property.
In the universe of Rick and Morty, there is a repeat skepticism
of organization in general. Yes. Our Rick, for instance, is the quote unquote only Rick that isn't part of the citadel of Ricks, you know, where it's you know, that in an infinite universe there's infinite Ricks, and most of those Ricks like the smell of their own farts, so to speak, and like have a boys club where they sit on a citadel and they all dumped their wives and abandoned their children, and Rick's too cool for that. Our Rick's origin story, in spite of him being the most cynical, the rogue Rick, it starts with that he is the most heartbroken, he was the most empathic, the most connected to his marriage.
Right, that he is more deeply human, and that his wound was so bad that it's scabbed over harder than anyone. You mentioned the Citadel of Ricks. Let's take a look at that.
The division I see is between the Ricks and Mortys that like the Citadel divided and the rest of us. I see it everywhere I go. I see it in our schools, where they teach Mortys we're all the same because they're threatened by what makes us unique. I see it in our streets, where they give guns to Mortys, so we're too busy fighting each other to fight real injustice.
Earnest or also satire?
A spoiler of that is that character that's talking, who's the kind of, let's call him an Obama-esque figure, or a Kennedy, or you know, Robert Redford in The Candidate,
is an evil manipulator.
He's evil Morty. He is.
So we can't. So the most honeyed, sweet, idealistic pitch we ever get is still underneath it. There's something cynical and rotten. This is why I say the show has a political bent.
It's got a nihilistic bent, and I am not a nihilist, but it has a nihilistic bent. But nihilism, you know, I think that it shouldn't punish empathy. That's what I always say in the writers' room. We have to stop short of punishing empathy.
That's one approach to a worldview. Then there's the show's approach towards ethics and the meaning of life. I want to turn you to one of your most significant episodes of Rick and Morty. That's Amorte.
Okay.
Are you able to describe the plot of that in a sentence or two, or is that impossible?
Morty is told by Rick that there is a planet where if people self-kill, when they do that, a complex cortisol reaction in their blood makes their insides into delicious spaghetti. Morty discovering that leads to just sort of an exploration of themes of right to die in the meat industry and things like that, without soapboxing about it, just exploring those themes in a strange way.
So these beings that look like people, that maybe have soul or ethical value, when they die that way, they become delicious spaghetti.
Yes.
Okay, let's look at this moment where this is sort of revealed.
So we were eating people.
I'm afraid so.
They were so spaghetti-esque.
Yes, they were.
It's going to be hard to
put out of your mind, yes. Which is why I thought it best to keep you all in the dark.
So Morty ruined spaghetti night.
Correct.
Summer, it was people.
So starting right there, it's bad to eat these people, but they're mad at Morty for telling the truth about it?
Yeah. Morty he told them how the sausage is made.
In this story, it's bad that it's people, but is the story trying to make us think that animals are like people too?
In the story, the characters don't like the idea of eating people. Therefore, when they didn't know they were eating people, they were happy. Now they're sad.
But they also really like eating good spaghetti. Right. So there's this tension.
It's delicious, and now it's not going to be delicious for them because they know it's people. So they wish that they were still ignorant of it. It would be like if McDonald's just started putting dead cows hanging upside down on the bag, where you got at the drive-thru. You'd be like, why are you got to do that, man? And if they'd be like, well, it's what it is, and you'd be like, well, yeah, but don't. I like thinking that they grow on trees shaped like little saucers.
Right.